With that bit of background, I will now go straight into what is contained in our media release, which I hope everyone in the room has a copy, where we look at what we call a marginal improvement of audit outcomes. That's the overall conclusion that we have come in respect of the audit period 2015-2016, that the improvement in the audit outcomes, it is certainly better than what it was in the 2014-15 year, but that improvement is marginal, as we will demonstrate in a number of areas. One of the things that is important to take note also is the fact that this report that we are releasing today emphasizes the journey of accountability, which is what I have put up on the slide up there. We are wanting to anchor these audit outcomes around the essence of the cycle of accountability. And as you see on that slide on the screen, this cycle of accountability, as we articulate it in the media brief, is about reinforcing the need for plans to be articulated, not only those that will trigger good audit outcomes, but also the plans that will trigger the delivery of services for the respective communities. It is upon the articulation of these plans that we come in as an audit office to insist on the need for internal supervisory controls to be put in place in each of the municipalities where we audit. And we believe that with adequate monitoring by leadership of all of these municipalities, particularly the councils, we are likely to see a good focus on how financial management could be fixed in local government. We've also highlighted in our cycle of accountability the very essence of consequences when things that were planned do not come out as planned, or where there's a deviation from prescribed norms and standards in respect of financial management disciplines. What you see under 5 here is the need for consequences to be elevated and to attach to those that consistently do wrong or deviate from financial management disciplines. If you look at the end of that whole cycle, it's all about saying when you do this work of accountability, it's work that is supposed to trigger the better services that are delivered to communities, because the money that is needed to do those services, if it is adequately controlled, it is adequately supervised, it is managed, and it is used for the purposes intended, it is possible that by far the number of services that are now no longer available will possibly be available if those resources are adequately accounted for and there's accountability for them. So that is one of the key anchors of this report. It talks about issues of the leadership of each of these institutions taking steps to plan as a start their activities rather than stumbling into areas of supply chain on the day or week before that is required. What we are emphasizing here is that the sufficient resources that have been set aside, including systems that have been put in place by municipalities, to ensure that plans are articulated. However, when those plans are developed, we are also insisting that the doing must be the emphasis. It's no use having financial recovery plans that will not be done. And I think to ensure that they are being done, we are also putting in place a suggestion, even in our report, that there must be a whole host of checking mechanisms to make sure that the leadership charged with accountability over the instrument of financial management and the delivery of services are the ones who do the monitoring at an institutional level, but also at a project delivery level. So these are some of the principles that we are highlighting in respect of the report, as well as what we have set out in the media release. The other area that stands out very importantly for us as we look at the journey that we have been on in the past year as well as the last couple of years, if you look at that spider web that is on the screen right now, we really are flagging the issues that we are highlighting as the major internal control weaknesses that cause financial loss in a number of instances. So if you look at that spider web, just to explain it a bit, where you see 100% is actually at the center of that spider web, which means the center, which is 100%, will mean that everybody needs to work towards being at the center. That is the ideal situation if you look at issues of audit outcomes, if you look at issues of compliance, If you look at the management of irregular expenditure as well as the fruitless and wasteful expenditure, if you look at issues of the financial health of municipalities, what you are saying in that spider web, the world will be a better place for all of the municipalities if that blue circle, which depicts the current year, the blue circle on that spider web, if it was where the maroon line is, which is the center, that's where the 100% is. Where it is currently looking at revolving now, it's somewhere around 20%. What it means is that of the 263 municipalities that we have assessed and audited, almost 20% of them are good at a number of these controls. That's what that particular depiction is. And you'll see in the report in what respects is the audit conclusion suggesting that. One of the things that we believe from an internal control point of view, if we are to get those graphs to move from where the 20% bar is running currently for all of them to where the center is, which is effectively where the ideal place should be. A person who is at the 100% center is an institution that has got all their control weaknesses being addressed, and it's got a formal system of supervision and control management with regards to financial systems and all of that. This is the picture that we are painting, which reflects on all 263 of them, is that it's an average of about 20% of that 263 that can be classified as having robust and strong financial control disciplines as we speak, which means that we've got a big challenge to push the same level of disciplines on the other 80% who are currently not having those disciplines in place. That's what the real essence of the work that is coming out of our audit report is about. If you look at the area of compliance, if you look at the issues of compliance with supply chain management regulations, compliance is fairly weak because it's still about 20% of them that comply with the regulations that govern supply chain management. If you look at the area of irregular and supply chain management, irregular expenditure, it is only an exception rather than all of them that comply with those disciplines of supply chain. And so it goes with all the other items of internal control. Among the issues that we are picking up in the audit work that we have done is the whole question of the role of leadership. If you look at page 2 of the media release, we highlight some of the key issues that have been diagnosed through the audit, which speak, among others, to setting the tone at the top at an institutional level. That is the first bullet. It speaks to the issue of the role of leadership in ensuring that these disciplines of internal control are introduced and are entrenched in the management of finances as well as the reporting mechanisms of each of the municipalities. We've picked up also another clearing matter in a number of them, which speaks to proper record keeping. In the absence of proper records in an environment where accountability for spending finances is required, you are opening up the system to all sorts of potential abuse. And so we believe that in order for these controls to improve, the issue of proper record keeping ought to be given specific attention. The basic controls that ensure that transactions are processed, recorded, and reported accurately are the kind of stuff that we examine when we do our quarterly key controls with municipalities, where we look at their daily, their monthly, as well as their quarterly controls. The kind of supervisory controls that ensure that all the monies that are being spent are accounted for and that somebody is held to account for instances where there are deviations. The filling of vacancies as well as appropriate information technology are some of the issues that we attribute to the bulk of the weaknesses in terms of what you see on the slide up there. So that is the key area which I think is clear in terms of looking at our report as well as what has been surfaced in our media release, that a number of these municipalities over the years have been alerted to the risks associated with these weaknesses, and many of them have either responded very late. However, some of them have not fully responded to the implementation of the recommendations that have been issued through the audit. Let's now have a look at a glance as to where we are in relation to the last 2 years. You will remember, and of course, as has been reported accurately this year, Last year we ended up with a total of about 54 municipalities across all 263 to 78 of them, where about only 18% is now clean. And let me quite quickly get into that classification of clean. It's important to note that these ones that are clean are the ones where we have assessed them at 3 levels. The 1 level is when we assess them in terms of the accurate financial management discipline. That's number 1. Do they have all the necessary disciplines, the controls, and do they adhere to the prescribed norms and standards for accounting for transactions? That's the first point we evaluate. The second point we look at also is to assess whether they have reported accurately through their system of reporting about their activities, what we call the predetermined objectives. So all of them set predetermined objectives against which those expenditures are going to be committed. And so here, in terms of the clean ones, those are the ones who've also passed that part of the test. However, the third one is the component that deals with the compliance with financial management regulations, issues pertaining to supply chain, issues pertaining to how to handle their budgets, and a whole host of other compliance-related issues. So in terms of this report, therefore, when you read these different color lines, the green one is where these municipalities, to the extent of 49 of them, have passed all 3 of those tests. That's why we call them clean. Let me emphasize, when we say they are clean, we are saying that in the context of a statutory financial audit, where there is a requirement for certain samples of transactions to be selected, these particular institutions were found to have complied with the regulations, the rules, the financial management disciplines in all manner of materiality that the auditors have identified. So if the auditors have looked at their assets, they've looked at their cash handling system, they've looked at how they manage their expenditure, it means the auditors did not find any fault in any significant area that would cause them to be concerned about the accuracy of their numbers. That's what that conclusion is about. I want to emphasize it because it does not mean that that particular environment is free from anything that could be closer to abuse, or somebody tomorrow decided to circumvent those controls, and therefore it may well become a target of that instance. In this case, we're saying that those controls that we examine and assess, we have found them to be consistently applied. The level of segregation of duties in certain areas has also been assessed, and therefore the risk associated with deviation of finances in that category of municipalities is fairly low. That's what that conclusion is about. And therefore the rest of them, if you look at the yellow category, that's when they have passed the test with regards to the accurate financial management in respect of financial management and reporting. However, they either did not comply with all the regulations governing financial management, in which case you will find instances where they have irregular expenditure, even though their accounts are accurate. They may have put the debit and the credit in the right place. We may have pointed to them during the audit also areas that required them to adjust, and they would have complied. But the bottom line is that when it comes to the procurement of goods and services, quite a number of these did not come to the party. So the point of the matter, therefore, is that in an accounting system, it is possible to get the debit and the credit in the right place. But that is not a full guarantee for whether the conduct of the transaction was carried out in a manner consistent, for example, for supply chain, with Section 217 of the Constitution, which prescribes that supply chain must be done in a transparent, fair, and competitive manner. So those are the instances that have caused many of these under the 122 not to become clean, because they still are battling to deal with some of those historical issues in irregular expenditure. Some of them have also been found to be wanting when it comes to compliance with the reporting on their performance in a number of cases. So if you group the ones that are green according to what's on the slide, as well as the ones that are yellow, you will find a combination of municipalities that have passed the test as far as the debits and credits are concerned, and that is the combination of 49 plus 122. The difference between them is that the yellow, which is the unqualified with findings, are the ones that are happy to report the numbers for as long as you're not going to worry them about the things they don't comply with. And those are the things sometimes that attract financial loss. I might well flag that one. So those are the two key categories if one looks at the audit outcomes. And if you look at the next ones, the purple one being the qualified accounts, these are municipalities in total across all of the provinces that the auditors were not happy even with how they presented their numbers as far as the financial statements are concerned. So that purple, which is a qualification of the financial management system, is starting to say that despite all the opportunity that was given to you as municipalities, you still were not able to get it right, even after attempts to get you to make the adjustments. This is a case where the auditors do not agree with the numbers that have been presented insofar as the accounts are concerned. And then the last category, the red one. And I think it's important to note that the red one comes at times when the auditors are not able to find the appropriate requisite evidence to support the transactions that are reflected in the financial statements. Let me repeat this again. The red ones, which is the disclaimers, is when the auditors are saying they are disclaiming their opinion because according to them, what has been presented to them as a substantiation of the transactions entered into was not satisfactory, and in some instances was not available. And therefore the auditors say, we do not know whether the financial statements present fairly because we were not provided with competent evidence to come to that conclusion. And that is one area which I think needs to be noted, that it used to be one of the major, if you look at 5-10 years ago, if you look at this profile of 5 or 10 years ago, the number of these used to be in triple digits, and I think you can see that over the years there's been quite a significant effort thanks to a number of efforts by SALCA among others, as well as COCTA, who have pushed for this to be given clear priority. And we're starting to see the extent of disclaimed audits starting to recede. But I think our target is to make sure that they are completely eliminated, because these ones are the ones that you have no idea what has happened, because either the accounting records have not been kept or the documents to support the transactions have not been kept in order to provide evidence to the auditors. So that is an undesirable situation in essence. And then of course the blue, which is the 15, as I said, if you take the 278 minus 15, we are reporting on 263 of them, which means the 15 of them, we put a cutoff date and said, beyond this date, we are going to leave you out if you have not submitted your financial statements. It's a risky area because the more that number grows, the more the level of accountability is lost if they do not report on their accounts as required. So we are also looking at this area as one of the key issues in terms of these audit outcomes. Now, if you want to have a look at how each of the provinces have done following the color coding that we have used, consistent with all these prior years, I'm sure having explained those three colors now, you can apply your mind to which provinces have come to the party in respect of the level of clean audits as well as the improvement in other categories of financial management. So as we stand today and you look at the media release, we do say some stuff about these audit outcomes as far as the provinces are concerned. It's worth highlighting that the Western Cape at 80% of clean audit opinions, followed by KwaZulu-Natal at 18%, and the Eastern Cape at 16%. You can regard those three provinces as the provinces. Even if you look at what is on the screen there, you can see that those three provinces potentially are ahead of the others as far as the achievement of these clean audits. And the attributable reasons to what has been achieved in each of these provinces, we have set it out clearly in the media release. It's also worth noting that at the bottom of the scale, when it comes to very weak governance systems in terms of municipalities by province, you will see on page 7 that we draw attention to the weaknesses in the administration of finances as well as related governance instruments in areas in the Northwest, in the Northern Cape, and the Free State. Those are the three provinces that are battling to come to the party. And you'll see in the annual report that we are issuing in terms of the general report, there are annexures that show, I think it's Annexure A of that report, I just don't know what page it is. But if you look at those, provinces, as well as the type of issues by municipality that have caused them to get to this kind of state, you will have an appreciation of the type of issues that the audit has highlighted during the course of the year. And the ones that are battling with some improvements that have been noted during the audit are your Gauteng. Gauteng, it's worth noting that despite the fact that it has not sustained some of the clean audits that they have achieved before, Midvaal continues to be one of the municipalities that has been continuing to be clean in the province of Gauteng. However, it's worth noting that there's not a single municipality in Gauteng that has been qualified. All 100% of the municipalities in Gauteng are unqualified, despite the fact that they have not yet got to the green. I think it's got to be recognized, because in some instances, much as you may have a majority of the municipalities that have been unqualified, you still have those that are, call them the laggards, the ones that are battling to come out of the rut. And Gauteng is not like that. I think it's something to be commended for the effort in making sure that financial administration, at least at all municipalities, can be found to be credible, much as we are also interested in making sure that they comply with the laws and regulations in Gauteng. I think that is a significant matter that is worth highlighting as far as the Gauteng outcomes are concerned. And then we are left with the likes of Mpumalanga and Limpopo, who also in many ways have also shown some good improvements. You'll see in our narrative in the report, as well as the media relief, the effort that has been put forth by the Premier in particular in Limpopo, but a number of other institutional arrangements that have emerged within Mpumalanga to support the good trend that is starting to emerge as far as audit outcomes. So the long and short of it, much as we have seen a marginal improvement overall, at least one can see that there are some good efforts that are coming through from a number of these municipalities to try and gear up to a good state of financial management. There's one other point which we felt is important to highlight as we flag the issue of governance of systems. I think you would have noted that the issue of internal controls, as we flag it, continues to be weak. However, one of the most important issues is what I'm highlighting on the slide here, where we look forward now to say, what is the financial viability prospect of these municipalities as we look at them today going into the future? Taking into account the weaknesses in the internal control environment, what is the future prospect for financial sustainability? You can see here on the slide, those percentages, they represent the percentage of municipalities out of 263 that have been analyzed. So it will be 27% of the 263 municipalities have a material uncertainty with regards to their ability to operate in the future. There's detail in the report which indicates what are the factors that have been considered in arriving at that conclusion. About 33% of them have incurred a deficit in their financial statements, which means that if you account for all of the transactions that they've entered into, they have accounted for expenditure that has now exceeded the revenue that they are able to generate. So if you've got a third of municipalities whose expenditure is starting to become small, or rather bigger than the revenue that they are able to get either from their appropriation or from the sale of services, that is starting to be a red flag, because it means that it may not continue sustainably into the future if these revenues continue not to be available. The same goes for the length of time it takes many of them to collect the cash that's due to them. You'll see that from the second bottom bullet, which is about 44% of them normally takes more than 120 days for the money that is owed to them, which means they run for some 4 months before the cash comes into the bank account, while they are required to pay their creditors a lot more earlier. So this is starting to introduce some of the major financial risks which point to the risks associated with sustainability of finances. So the key message in our report this time around is to say, in an environment where the disciplines of internal control are not strong, and that you've got a pressure on the access to the finances to be able to do what you need to do, you've got a twin problem. You can't control the expenditures that are being incurred, but at the same time the pressure is real in terms of the availability of those finances. So that is in essence, the bulk of what we wanting to share today in respect of the audit outcomes. And I thought as you go through the media release, you will figure out that we also made comment about the area of irregular expenditure as well as fruitless and wasteful expenditure. In this instance, as far as the municipalities are concerned, if you look at page 10 of the media release, where we say that this irregular expenditure in the current period, remember now this is now for local government. When we were reporting last year, and I'm sure in our minds we always walk around with this 46.6 billion of irregular expenditure. That was in respect of national and provincial departments who have a separate year end to municipalities. Municipalities have got a June year end, and their total amount per these accounts that we are auditing now is 16.81 billion of irregular expenditure, which has grown by 50% compared to where it was the previous period. Now that's a huge amount of irregular expenditure growing, as it were. And I think if one goes back to that slide on internal control, it is a combination of the failure of those controls that gives rise to this kind of irregular expenditure. And the same with fruitless and wasteful expenditure. This one has at least been contained because it's starting to reduce from the level where it was in the previous year. Let's hope that the disciplines that are identified for this one will continue. Let me deal with one aspect which is contained in page 11 of the media release, where we deal with the issue of consequences. You will recall that in the past year, when we released the audit outcomes for the PFMA, there was no doubt a singular call from people listening and writing about these audit outcomes, where they suggested that, but in the absence of consequences, these things are going to continue. And we agreed with them because we've been painting this picture of lack of consequences over a number of years, as you would know, in respect of the work that we do. And of course, we decided that we cannot ignore that call and that cry, and we went ahead and interacted with our committee in Parliament, the Standing Committee on the Auditor-General. And you'll recall also that the suggestion about attending to the issue of consequences was also made by the chair of our Standing Committee when we presented the outcomes in Parliament last year, where it was clear that there was going to be an engagement between the Audit Office together with Parliament. That engagement has started. We presented our proposals, which proposals are confined to dealing with how we can enhance the area of consequences by improving what has been articulated in our powers. So that matter is now with the Standing Committee on the AG in Parliament, and we are continuing the interactions with them. And the idea behind it is to say, and this is how we have proposed it, at the end of an audit cycle, like we are doing now, where we have issued the financial statements and we have issued the general report, what must follow from there must be a mandatory schedule of issues that have been identified either in the area of supply chain or in the area of general financial management, which schedule must be handed over because the auditors would have interrogated the information through the audit and would have picked up the type of issues that are susceptible to potential abuse when it comes to financial management. So this proposal is saying that one of our powers ought to be to generate this mandatory list of entities and municipalities and all of them, and identify those key areas that require to be specifically referred to an investigative agency who will then pronounce on the final outcome of that matter. Because the limitation of an audit is that throughout the transactioning in a particular entity, we can only see a sample of transactions. Even those transactions that we've tested, we test them from an angle of validity of the transaction, the completeness of the transaction, and accuracy risks of the transaction. But we never take it beyond that and start interrogating culpability. If there's a persistence of irregular expenditure in a particular entity, what we are saying is that those type of matters ought to be what will be incorporated in the criteria for handover for referral. And possibly that referral will now close the issue of what happens to these matters after they have been reported. We have had some good support and a nod from the parliamentary committee. However, the process still has to take its course to ensure that it can be written in our Public Audit Act, so that when we get to this point and somebody wants to know in 2018 what happened to the matters that were handed over to whatever the agencies were, we should be able to start with that report before we get to the next year's report and be able to say, of the 100 or of the 60 issues that were handed over for investigation, they were all reported and they were all investigated, and this is the outcome of them. And I think it will be best then for the public to determine whether there has been consequence or there has not been consequence around that matter. But ours is not going to be the enforcement that we are seeking. We are seeking the clarity in our act to make sure that we can hand them over, and those particular institutions, through their mandate, will pursue the investigation and ultimately hand the final outcomes to those that are charged with governance. It is at that point that the real actions that we think ought to be taken with these matters will start surfacing. So on that note, we present this report, and this report has obviously been tabled for purposes of getting it as a public document, and we certainly would like to thank all the teams that have worked in our office to produce this amount of work. And we believe that also as journalists, while we are going through this report, you will find some interesting elements in this report that you would want to drill into. And as you navigate through it, you will find that also, if I may just pay one attention to this on section 5 of the report, which is between page 74 and page 84. That's where we deal with the issue of certain select performance programs that we have identified. For example, you'll find a lot of information on the provision of water and infrastructure in a number of municipalities where we have tested this particular deliverable. You will find also certain observations and findings that we have made as far as the road infrastructure delivery, because many of them have got integrated transport plans that they are delivering across the board. And we're giving some reflection on some of the findings that we made in this area. But if you're also looking for a provincial overview where we set out the performance of each of the provinces, it's only in about 30 pages of the report from 141 to 172. Each one of the provinces has got an average of about 3 pages of high-level analysis in terms of these outcomes as they pertain to the municipalities in that province. So we hope that this will be helpful in not waiting for us to reflect on this in the public domain, but for yourselves to go into the detail of this report and do as you normally do with it. Thank you very much, Program Director.